Airline Pilot Guy, episode 199.5.
Flight 209, you're cleared for takeoff.
Roger.
LA departure 123.9.
Roger. Less than
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from my side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 1A at the APG headquarters in Roswell, Georgia. In this episode, a zombie 777, another cargo carrier, and the FAA scolds Allegiant. So get all settled in, tray tables and seat backs in their upright and locked positions. Electronic devices powered on. Flight 199.5 is ready for pushback. Hello and happy holidays, everyone, and welcome to the Airline Pilot Guy Show. I'm Jeff Nielsen, also known as Captain Jeff, here running the show from the, as I mentioned, the headquarters building in Roswell, Georgia, a northern Atlanta suburb. And joining me today from sunny Miami, I'm assuming it's sunny down there, but warm Miami, I'm sure, Miami Rick.
Hey everybody, it's Miami Rick. Yeah, it'd be kind of weird if it was sunny right now. It's 9:15 Eastern time. So.
Oh, you didn't have to give it away.
Except that you see the window behind me.
Well, that's true. Well, it has been sunny though. It's been sunny. It's been beautiful out here. It's a little muggy. It really doesn't even feel like wintertime, but that's good. You know, it's good stuff. It's been good weather down here. Happy to be along 199.5, and happy to be alongside you, Captain Jeff, and Dr. Steph for another fun-filled episode of the APG.
Yes, and speaking of Dr. Steph in the Charlotte area, hello, Dr. Steph.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Great. How was your Christmas?
Christmas was really good. It was kind of low key because we did all the fun stuff before that. Had a little vacation the week before Christmas.
Yeah, where were you? You were on the last show.
Yeah, I've missed out on the last show, so it feels like I haven't talked to you guys in forever. But good to be back. And we went to, I took my dad on a little vacation down to the Caribbean to the island of Montserrat for a few days, which is near Antigua.
And so did you figure out exactly how to pronounce that?
Antigua.
Okay, there you go.
Correct. So
First Officer Jeff is clapping, I guess, right now.
He's always right.
So yeah, we missed having you on the show while you were down there, you know, just having a bad time.
Yeah, it was
in the
terrible.
Caribbean island.
It was like sunny, 75 degrees every day. We had the whole beach to ourselves pretty much every day.
Nice.
It was really nice.
Very good.
I mean, terrible. I mean,
yeah, awful.
Yeah.
Well, I got a little Christmas gift from Dr. Steph. It's a little sweater. If you're watching the video, let me describe it to those who can't see it. It's Sierra Nevada's Celebration Ale, but it's like a little sweater koozie for my Sierra Nevada. And this is actually Sierra Nevada Celebration Ale underneath here. See?
Ooh.
And it's like special size for the celebration bottle because those bottles are a little bit.
Oh, they're a little
shorter.
bit different shape?
Yeah, than most. I don't know.
They're celebratory.
That's right.
They are. One of my favorite beers. Okay. Well, how was your Christmas, Rick?
It was good. Just here at the house. I had, well, basically my family's up in Virginia, and I had to basically be here because I was sitting reserved on the 25th, 26th, and 27th. And on the 28th, they, made me fly, so I really couldn't have gone anywhere. So I just basically spent it, here at home by myself, which, kind of a downer, but whatever. It's the life of a pilot. Sometimes it's with the family, sometimes it's by yourself. It's not the first time; it won't be the last time. But hey, it was good. It was good.
Well, very good. Hey, just an aside. It sounds like your microphone is not the one that you're in front of. But really? It sounds like you're, But if you can fix that, that's good. If not, don't worry about it. We can still hear you all right. But it's just not that ATR microphone sound. Yeah, in fact, Mike also noticed that in the chat room.
Okay, how about now?
Nope. Still hearing the Surface microphone.
Okay.
Have you tried that little thing, that little icon in the
Mhm.
address bar? Yeah. The problem is, I think once you start, it just it sticks with it. You
You're
can't really
committed.
change it. You're committed, man. So that's okay. Let's see. What else did I want to talk about before we move on with a little bit of news and then feedback? Teespring. We had a campaign, the second Acme Airlines T-shirt campaign. By the way, both Dr. Steph and Miami Rick are wearing the dark blue version of the APG shirt, and right now as we're recording, I'm not. I don't know why I'm not in uniform, but I'm not. And anyway, we had the second round of that T-shirt on sale, and several of you had a little bit of a problem. You ended up receiving not the Acme shirt, but you received "Wishing You a Great White Christmas" or something like that. It's like a great white shark. Looks like a Christmas sweater, but it's a T-shirt. And it was not the Acme shirt. And I contacted Teespring, and they said just have everyone who receives the wrong shirt have them contact us, and then we'll make them right. I think basically what they do is they have you just keep the wrong shirt, and then they're going to print up whatever you actually ordered and send it to you. I do apologize if some of you were expecting it for Christmas time. That didn't work out, I guess. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that, and hopefully we won't have any kind of issue like that in the future with Teespring. And the other thing we wanted to talk about before we go on with the news and the coffee fund and all that jazz is episode 200. And as you've noticed, this is episode 199.5 because we weren't quite ready to pull the trigger on episode 200. That'll happen in the first week, the end of the first week in January. And I don't know, Miami Rick and Dr. Steph have been kind of secretive a little bit about exactly what it is we're going to do. And
of course, he chooses now to disappear and let me, just fend for myself on this one.
Did he decide to go ahead and leave
He was trying to reboot with the microphone. He'll be back. Oh, here he is.
There we go. Okay.
But yeah, we might have some plans in the works for episode 200.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. I'm back.
Oh. Yeah, right. And we can hear you on the ATR.
Excellent. Sorry about that. So we were talking about 200.
Yeah, we just started.
Yeah, talking about it, and I said that you and Steph were kind of saying, "Hey, make sure that you plan your schedule, your bidding for January around the 7th of the month because we want you to come down to Miami." And I went, "Okay." So
yeah, we figured Dr. Steph's going to be down here for work, and I'm going to be down here, and why not get together and have a
worked out
little
pretty
200.
well with the timing.
There you go.
Yeah.
So it's going to be good. Just be the three of us together. So it's an important event. 200. It's a milestone. Yeah. So we figured why not do it in person?
The bicentennial edition.
There you go.
I don't know if you guys remember, but you guys probably weren't even born in 1976.
Nope.
Thank goodness I missed bell bottoms.
Yeah, that was a big year.
I think I would have looked good in bell bottoms.
Yeah. You'd look good in anything, Steffi, but still, bell bottoms, no.
Yeah, it was cool. Peace signs. There are a lot of things. A lot of styles today are still kind of reminiscent of the 70s. Not exactly.
Yeah,
well,
everything comes back around.
Yeah, they say it's cyclical, so I don't know. You won't see me in bell bottoms though.
Dave from the boat was 5 in 1976. I was a junior in high school, and I played in the Marching 200 band for. I was down in Mobile, and they had every year they have the Senior Bowl, and it was a big deal. The bicentennial 1976 version, and we had the Marching 200 big band. I think it was more than 200 of us actually. And anyway, I'm getting off track. So. Look forward to
episode 200.
Yeah, episode 200.
Going to be fantastic. Don't miss it. January 7th.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Enough said regarding that. Time now for this. The APG Coffee Fund.
Johnny, how about some more coffee? No thanks.
Okay. The Coffee Fund is your way to support the APG show, the Airline Pilot Guy show, financially, if you have the resources to do so. If you don't, please don't give any money to the fund. Okay? Promise me. And that is used to offset costs like web hosting and media hosting and equipment costs, as well as it's going to help us with some of our expenses heading over to Farnborough next year, July of 2016. So if you're interested in helping support us, head over to airlinepilotguy.com/coffee. And since the last episode, we had several actually take the charge and donate some hard-earned money to the APG show. Terrence Jeffries, Nico Rieger, Todd Johnson, David Heath, Jamie Hubert, Douglas Wilson, James Baker, Peter Shankman, I believe, The Geek Factory, Steve Trumbull, Lester Schulman, Rory McLaughlin, and Manuel Moran Vaquero.
Very nice.
Thank you. I'll try. And then another method is to become a patron of the arts, or, well, if not the arts, at least our show. And that's via patreon.com. You kind of decide to pledge a certain amount per episode, and then you can put a cap on, how much you want to spend per month. Basically, whatever you want to spend per episode, multiply that by 4, and then you can say, that's my cap. Don't charge me any more than that, if you want to do that. And that's at patreon.com/airlinepilotguy. But all the information regarding either method is available by heading over to airlinepilotguy.com/coffee. And since the last show, we have, well, you know what? I don't remember exactly how many of these I already mentioned. So this is since the beginning of December, we have 5 new patrons. We have Paul Breran, Andy Hopper, Mike Ham, Paul Whittle, and Stephen Ivey. So thank you, all of you, for your contributions to the APG Coffee Fund.
Stand by for news.
All right, let's start with a report from Australian investigators suggest that the MH370, the Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, the missing 777, was a zombie plane. I wish I had some kind of a zombie sound effect. What would be a zombie sound effect?
You need to go back to the Halloween music.
Yeah. Oh, well, don't have that.
I don't think we had any.
Buried in the lengthy report released last week. Of course, this was, earlier this month. So several weeks ago, was one crucial revelation. The aircraft suffered a serious technical problem triggered by a power outage. The Australian Defence Science and Technology Report officially acknowledges that the doomed Malaysia Airlines flight suffered a sudden electrical failure before its disappearance on March 8th last year. This backs the popular zombie plane theory, whereby the missing plane's avionics systems are ravaged, rendering the flight crew helpless, and the aircraft continued flying on autopilot until it ran out of fuel. A grim timeline reveals the power blackout occurred in a 56-minute window between the final scheduled contact from the jet's aircraft communications addressing and reporting system. We call it ACARS because it's easier to say it that way. And a failed attempt from dispatchers to contact the crew. The report provides 4 possible explanations for the outage, which place blame either on human intervention or a technical fault. Crew action in the cockpit using overhead switches, a sudden error requiring an auxiliary power unit to start emergency power, and somebody pulling out and resetting circuit breakers in the equipment bay, or intermittent technical failures. Whether one of these scenarios is correct can only be confirmed if the search for the lost plane is successful. So, Miami Rick,
Yes.
what do you think? Is this a possibility, or any of these scenarios like reasonable in your mind?
No, I mean, it's one of those things that it's been so long, and there are so many theories out there as to what happened to this airplane that, yeah, I mean, everyone's got their own little, scenario or reason why this airplane's missing. As far as, flying the aircraft and knowing the systems away, I know them because it's my bread and butter. It's my office basically. A sudden and complete electrical failure on an aircraft with that many backups and levels of redundancy is just, it's very, very remote, if not impossible. For example, if the AC buses become unpowered for some reason, then the DC system, through what's called a inverter, is going to transfer DC power from the batteries through that inverter and turn that 28 volt DC electricity into 115 volts 400 hertz electricity to power at least one AC bus, until the auxiliary power unit automatically starts and is able to power the AC buses in question. So I don't know what the status of the APU was when this aircraft was dispatched for its flight to Beijing. But if the APU was not an issue and this aircraft being dispatched, or, if the APU was not written up, then a sudden electrical failure should be a non-issue. We've talked about how it is possible to dispatch an aircraft with certain systems inoperative based on what's called a CDL, which stands for Configuration Deviation List, which basically lists out or delineates the number and the types of equipment that are with which you are legally able to be dispatched with those pieces of equipment being inoperative. But I don't know what the situation was with the APU there. But a complete electrical failure and a complete electrical, just basically the aircraft going completely dark, is something that I can't wrap my head around, particularly on a 777. So I don't see that happening.
Okay, you heard it here from our resident 777 expert, Rick. Anything to add to that, Steph?
Well, I mean, I was going to say everything that Rick just said, but he covered it.
Okay.
So good job, Rick.
Steffi's got my back on the technical stuff.
Right.
Yeah. I would have rather have heard her say it with her voice, but oh well.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, that's all I could do. I'm like, AC power
Just
and
kidding. I'm
DC
sorry. Did I
power.
hurt your
What are we talking? Okay. I followed.
Isn't ACDC a band or something? I don't know.
Yeah, I think
so.
I've heard of them.
And what does that have to do with inverters? I don't know.
I have no idea.
Doesn't make any sense at all. All right. So Rick, you're we politely, do you take offense if we say you're a freight dog?
No, not at all.
I like dogs.
I call myself a freight dog.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, guess who wants to get into that freight dog business?
I read something about Amazon maybe going into freight dogging.
Yep. They are apparently, the rumors are that they're looking into expanding its delivery operations to avoid the bottlenecks caused by overwhelmed carriers such as UPS, by basically starting their own cargo airplane service. They're talking to.
Is this because they couldn't get on board with the drones quick enough?
I don't know.
Forget it. We'll just.
I would imagine maybe in the long-term scheme of things that they kind of view this as part, like a part of the picture.
I'm sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So apparently the rumor is that they've been negotiating to lease 20 Boeing 767 jets for its own air delivery service, according to the Seattle Times. The online retail giant wants to build out its own cargo operations to avoid delays from carriers such as United Parcel Service. And here's a quote from somebody, an analyst. So take this with a grain of salt. Amazon is pretty fed up with third-party carriers being a bottleneck to their growth. So that's what the story basically talks about. So we'll see. That'd be. I'm not sure if that'd be a good or bad thing. I don't think that the UPSs and FedExes of the world. I don't know. Do you think they'd be threatened by this, Rick?
I don't know. I mean, maybe at first, not so much, but you know what? Anytime you cut the middleman out of an operation, it threatens, I guess, whoever has that that contract. Maybe at first it's not going to be a big deal, but if the situation or this deal kind of snowballs into something that could threaten these established, parcel carriers, then, it could be an issue for them. It'd be interesting though. I mean, it'd be kind of, I don't know if they do get the ball rolling on this, imagine what it'd be like to get into that opportunity kind of, ground floor and see where that goes. So I don't know, might be a good opportunity for some pilots out there to maybe, I don't know, get something started there.
Yeah. And I'm sure you get a pretty cool discount with Amazon.com.
Hopefully.
I know.
Yeah. So I guess that this is really more than a rumor. According to an online news site, Motherboard, they said that there was a trial in Wilmington, Ohio. Some of you may recognize Wilmington, Ohio as the headquarters for Airborne Express when they were in business, and they flew out of that airport. It said that the FlightAware.com shows that there were couple carriers flying about 5 times a day from Wilmington to Dallas, Tampa, Ontario, and Allentown, Pennsylvania. Amazon has warehouses near each of those airports. Anyway, we'll keep our eyes and ears open for more information about that.
And you know what? Before we move on, I want to point out how it's interesting how the 767 line at the Boeing factory up in Seattle, it just won't die. For a long time, LAN Airlines down in South America, they were the ones that kept at least the passenger 767 production line going. And then afterwards, the cargo line going, and now UPS is getting brand new 767s out of the factory up there, and now the demand for these jets, is increasing. So it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how this whole situation pans out if Amazon decides to turn this into an operation.
Absolutely. Hey, remember back in episode 179, back in August, we were talking about this event that an Allegiant flight was flying from Las Vegas, Nevada to Fargo.
Was it Fargo? Yeah, I remember this one.
And apparently they were running a little bit late, and dispatchers didn't notice, I guess, and the pilots operating the flight didn't notice that the Fargo airport was closed for the time that they were anticipating arriving. And they basically had to declare a fuel emergency, and then basically saying, well, we had plenty of fuel. We could have made it to our destination alternate if we had to. Well, the Federal Aviation Administration on December 18th scolded Allegiant Air for an emergency landing at a closed airport in Fargo in a ruling that appears to contradict the airline's statements about the flight. The FAA issued a reprimand called a letter of correction to the Las Vegas-based airline, saying the July 23rd flight from Las Vegas to Fargo did not appear to have adequate fuel for such a trip. The agency also indicated that airline personnel may have failed to properly recognize airspace restrictions that applied to Fargo's Hector International Airport when the aircraft landed. And they're probably referring to the notice to airmen that was issued, basically saying, hey, the airport's closed during these hours because, was it the Blue Angels that were there?
Yeah, it was the Blue Angels.
That rings a bell. I think it was the Blue Angels.
I think they were practicing for an air show that they were going to do in Fargo during that time.
Doing a demo or something. Yep.
Yeah. So all this stands in contrast to Allegiant's previous statements to reporters indicating the flight had more than adequate fuel, and concluded, quote, our captain exercised sound judgment in the operation of his aircraft. Interestingly, we mentioned this on episode 179, the 2 pilots were management pilots. I'm not making any kind of correlation here, but one was, I think, the chief of safety, and I forgot what the other one was. Was he like the chief pilot or something?
Purely
like that?
coincidental.
Oh, I know.
It was 2 captains flying though.
I don't know.
I don't know that we ever saw that information, but
Yeah, but that's what I've heard anyway. I'm trying to find it here in this release, but maybe I was looking at that on another site. But I'm pretty sure that that's true. They were both not regular line pilots, but they were management pilots. Other people are supposed to take care of that stuff, not us.
that's for the little people to take care of.
Yes,
We just fly the plane.
the minions.
And it's you say that, but it's actually true.
I know. All right.
Pulling
I guess
back
that's
the curtain
enough.
on how things work.
Don't. There's nothing to see here.
Nothing
Move
to
on.
see here.
Move on.
Captain, incoming message.
This just in. Well, on the 9th of December. Almost 3 weeks ago. Anyway, Micah sent this to myself, Miami Rick, Dr. Steph, and Captain Nick, if you're there. Is Captain Nick here?
No.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. It's kind of late, I think, in the UK, if he's there, or I don't know if he's out flying or not. But anywho, first let me say what a great time I had being on the podcast with the 3 out of 4 of you. Seems with Rick and Jeff sharing a mic and camera, there would have been room for a 5th on the show. So I'm particularly disappointed that Captain Nick wasn't available. Truly, it was an honor to be with you, and I appreciate your indulgence of having me there. Well, Micah, we appreciate you being able to join us on that episode. We had a blast.
Oh, yeah.
Below is a forwarded message I just sent to the geeks. Normally, I wouldn't send the same news story out to both podcasts, but I think that this one's important enough to make sure it is mentioned on both shows. By the way, he's talking, of course, of the Airplane Geeks podcast, another stellar aviation podcast out there. And Micah is an important part of the content of that show. So if you already don't subscribe to the Airplane Geeks podcast, I highly recommend that you do, and you can hear more from the main guy, Micah. So here we go. This is a message that was sent to both of our podcasts regarding a news item in the Portland Press Herald, and this is Portland Press in Maine. Airports face shortage of air traffic controllers. A watchdog says 13 of the nation's busiest facilities need urgent attention for being understaffed. And the number of fully qualified controllers are below the minimum staffing requirements that the FAA has set for their facilities. And basically, the reason why Micah thought that this is important for us to talk about on the show is that, hey, if you're out there and you want to be part of an aviation career, you don't have to fly airplanes. There are all kinds of jobs in this big sphere of aviation. And of course, commercial airline aviation is just a small chunk of it. But within this world of commercial aviation is the controller, and a very important job. And I think it's a pretty well compensated job, and you're working basically for the government, and I think that's usually a good thing as far as pensions and other benefits. So you should check out, looking into the job if you are at an age that it would be appropriate. I think
and we should maybe mention those ages because there are specific.
And why don't you do that, Steph?
Well, I guess so. First of all, they won't hire new controllers older than the age of 31. And then the mandatory retirement age is 56. So that's kind of a short career if you get hired at the age of 30. But, still, like you said, good job. It's in aviation. And
oh, yeah, federal employee, federal benefits and all that kind of stuff. And I imagine it's kind of a short period there from 31 to 56, because I understand air traffic control type jobs are very, very stressful.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But I'm pretty certain that I've seen, if you follow the FAA on Twitter, occasionally they'll put out tweets when they are hiring for new air traffic control or have classes going on if you're interested. So I've seen that occasionally in the past. Nothing recently, but interesting.
Okay. The other thing we should probably point out is that, and we've talked about this on earlier episodes, that the way that potential candidates are screened has changed quite significantly over the last year or so, or maybe a little bit more than that. Basically, you take some kind of a biographical questionnaire or something like that, and we talked about the reason why it's kind of controversial is that there was some cheating going on, apparently. People helping people, put down the right answers because nobody really knows what the right answers are. There was an initiative back several years ago where several colleges basically were selected to have courses, college level courses for air traffic control. And these people, coming and graduating from these colleges were very, very highly qualified candidates. And with this new system, many of them were basically, because they didn't answer the biographical questionnaire or whatever it's called correctly, and they basically said thank you, but no thank you. So as I said, it's very controversial. I'm not sure I'm very happy with the way that they're conducting the search for qualified controllers. A lot of this diversity stuff going on, and I'm not against diversity, but I am all for hiring people that are the best, whether you have, pink or purple polka dots or whatever color your skin is. I don't care, as long as you're competent and you're a good controller, because it's a very important job out there that you're taking on.
Absolutely. Situational awareness for pilots is an issue. Imagine what it's like for a controller having to deal with several aircraft moving at different altitudes at hundreds of knots. And so you need to be on your game, and as long as you can perform up to par, then it really doesn't matter. And nothing else matters except for that.
Yep. Okay, moving on from XNA. I think that's Northwest Arkansas Regional, if I'm not mistaken. XNA Nick, he calls himself. He says, "Hey, Cap, Jeff thought this would be an interesting share with the APG community. I'm sure that Captain Rick..." Oh, you got promoted. Well, you were once a captain, so we'll call you Captain.
Yes, I was. Once a captain, always a captain, I guess.
That's right. Captain Rick can recall these verbatim without even looking at it. You guys are doing an awesome job with the podcast. Thank you, XNA, X-Ray November Alpha, Nick. And then he sends us a link to flight.org and Boeing 777 normal procedures flow diagrams. And so did you have a chance to look at these flow diagrams? They may not exactly match what your flow patterns are.
Yeah, I looked at them, and thanks for this great piece of feedback. They're all great pieces of feedback, but I'm always partial to little 777 quirks and stuff. And yeah, I mean the patterns are pretty standard. All the patterns are based on Boeing procedures, and airlines do have a chance to kind of customize their patterns or flow patterns based on the operation kind of aircraft that you have. One of the things that I noticed here, for example, is the ECL, the electronic checklist, is obviously applies to a passenger version of the 777. I fly the freighter version. And there are, little things here and there that are different, but the idea of having these kinds of flows kind of, set forth by the manufacturer is so that, all pilots fly the aircraft the same way. So it doesn't matter who you happen to be flying with that day. You both have been trained the same way, and you're both on the same page, and you kind of anticipate what the other, guy or gal is going to do. And then, and once you actuate a certain switch or button or something, the other person kind of knows what to expect from that. And then, you all know what the steps are in getting the aircraft from cold and dark to doing the secure procedure. So very, very interesting stuff. Very, very cool stuff. And like I said, very similar to the procedures that we use on our everyday in the 777 operation that I fly.
So with these flows, do you actually get pictures like that? Because that's really helpful, I think.
No, not in the manual. We don't have that. Okay. we use a publication called the Flight Crew Training Manual, which has pictures, but you don't have the, I guess, the yellow arrows pointing at, this panel, then that panel, then this panel. You kind of have the flight deck divided in areas of responsibility, and those areas of responsibility kind of you have two type scenarios. One is when the aircraft is on the ground, and one is when the aircraft is in the air. When the aircraft is on the ground, usually at most airlines, the pilot flying or the pilot that's in charge of taxiing the aircraft from the stand position to the runway is usually the captain. And so whether it's the first officer's leg or the captain's leg, while the aircraft is on the ground before the flight and on the ground after the landing, the areas of responsibility are, kind of the same. It kind of changes when you are, and from the takeoff portion of the flight to the landing portion of the flight, and obviously including the in-flight portion of the flight. When you are in that in those phases of flight, the areas of responsibility kind of change. And so if the captain is the pilot flying, then the captain has control of obviously what's called the mode control panel, which is the panel that it sits on the glare shield portion of the flight deck. And the mode control panel is where you have all of your autopilot switches and control knobs. You basically control your heading, your altitude, your airspeed through that panel. Also, the pilot flying is going to have control of the throttles, the yoke, and the pilot monitoring is going to take care of ATC communications, the radios, the overhead panel. So he is responsible of all the systems, monitoring the systems and doing all the selections that have to do with systems management. And he's going to be in charge of, deploying flaps and gear, and also the use of the control display unit. So basically the control display unit is the interface between the pilot and the flight management computer. So that belongs to the pilot monitoring. Whether it's the pilot, whether it's the captain or the first officer, really depends on who's flying the leg. But that's basically how you break it down. And so different phases of flight require different switches and buttons and controls to be actuated. So and it's all listed here. So in the Flight Crew Training Manual, it's all listed that way. And then each airline has what's called SOPs, which stand for Standard Operating Procedures. And the standard operating procedures for each airline is really how each airline customizes these normal type procedures for themselves. So the Flight Crew Training Manual is set forth by Boeing, and then the airline publishes their own standard operating procedures to customize those procedures for their own operation. So that's kind of how it works.
Gotcha.
And at Acme, we actually do have not color photos like what you see in this article, which we'll have in the show notes, a link to that. But it does have a pictorial of the basic flows that we, the pre-flight flows, the engine start flows, and that kind of thing.
Did you get when you transferred over to the, well, I guess, on the initial course for the 7.2, L1011, Mad Dog and all that stuff, did you get the big printouts of the big panels to do chair flying? Because when you fly an airplane for the first time, and when you're doing an initial course on an airplane for the first time, before you ever set foot in a simulator, you are issued these big, I guess, cutouts. Well, not cutouts, but these they look like posters that you kind of.
Yeah, it's basically a big poster of.
Yeah, that you set up in your your room or your hotel room or whatever, and you kind of work with the Flight Crew Training Manual and the standard operating procedures. You kind of work the flows with those panels so that by the time you get to your fixed space simulator portion of your initial training, where the location of each, kind of switch and control is, because it's very expensive to be lost, while in the sim.
Right, you're going,
exactly. I mean, where is that thing? So, it's better to kind of, hit the ground running and know where you are when it comes time to actually do the fixed base simulator, and much more so the full motion simulator, because that's even more expensive. So they want to make sure that you know where you're standing and what to do.
I'll see if I can dig up. I think I kept my L1011 and 727 little posters. Let's see if
Nice.
I can find them.
I got my 6.7s framed and my 777s framed.
Okay. Well, I don't. Mine, if I have them, are like folded up somewhere in some dusty binder somewhere. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But it'd be kind of fun to check it out.
Oh yeah.
All right. Just to acknowledge our live video recording on Blab, we have a couple of questions in the from the chat room. And the first one's from Dennis Hyde. He says, what would be a round number for VFR and IFR training? And I'd say 100. And moving on to Chris. Oh, I'm just kidding.
I think it depends greatly on where you live and are doing your training, but very funny.
I'm not sure
100.
exactly what a round number. What does he mean by that?
I think he wants to know how much it would cost for someone to do.
Because I could say 0. That's a round number.
0 is a round number.
Round number. Very
that would
round.
be very, very nice.
So, so what would a typical cost for, let's say, a private pilot certificate?
So
I guess Dr. Steph would be better suited to answer this, because I mean I've been out of flight school for
Well, it just depends on. So again, I think it depends a lot on where you live. Not only, not just meaning in the U.S. versus somewhere else, but even within the U.S., I think prices are going to vary somewhat. So I did my training in a, more rural part of the country, and it helped that my CFI was a good friend. And, you can also look at Part 61 versus, what is the other part?
141.
141. So you're going to have different costs depending on how you decide to do your training. So I did Part 61. So I basically did all my ground school work and everything else on my own. I didn't pay a lot of out of pocket for that. So that helped keep costs down.
Well, in our chat room as well, Nihilist Pilot, or Nihilist, I think it's Nihilist. He says 8,000, 10,000, depends on what gas costs, and it varies wildly.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's very true.
Also,
and it also, and I'm sorry, Captain Jeff, and I was going to say, it also depends on on your level of proficiency, because even though there's a certain number of hours that the FAA needs you to have before you are issued your certificate, a lot of pilots get their certificate with a minimum number of hours. A lot of pilots go a little bit over, or some pilots need more training. So it really depends on how proficient you are and how quickly you pick it up. Because remember, I mean, you have to take 2 steps back and think about this. You are flying an aircraft, which is something that humans are not supposed to, be doing in the first place. Flying, you're doing something that is completely, it's amazing. It's magical. So it's something that you kind of need to pick up. I do believe, however, and I was a CFI, II, MEI, all that stuff. And through my years of instructing, I saw that some people are born with it, and you kind of need to be born with it to a certain degree. Some people don't have it, and it's hard to sometimes, break those news to someone, because it doesn't matter how, pumped up they are. If you just don't have it, then it's just going to be a waste of time and money. So sometimes you just have to, tell them, it's sorry, but sorry. But it really depends, again, on how quickly you pick it up, on, the price of fuel, and, the where your CFI or your school is located. If, again, as Dr. Steph said, if you're going Part 61, if you're going Part 141. So there's many factors there that come into play.
I was just kind of giggling a little bit to myself, because I was recalling when I was in Air Force undergraduate pilot training, one of the guys in my class, in fact, it was one of my roommates, the last person you'd ever expect to be an Air Force pilot. And turns out that he just didn't have what it took. His problem was he'd get in the airplane, and, we have control sticks, not control yokes. And he'd turn the stick to bank the airplane to turn, but he wouldn't, neutralize the stick to maintain a certain bank angle and continuing the turn. He just keep holding this stick, so the airplane would continue to roll and roll and roll, and then the instructor would take over.
Aileron roll.
Yeah, I guess he thought it was kind of like a car, where you kind of turn the wheel and you hold the wheel in that position while you're turning, and then you roll it out, when you want to straighten out. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, I remember my favorite one was, bless his heart, great guy.
Bless his heart. But, dirt, bless his heart.
But we'd be, and he was never able to kind of get driving out of his head. So we'd be taxiing around, and he would, move the yoke as if it was a steering wheel. And he didn't get too far. And I told him, look, it's not for everybody. And it's just going to be a waste of your time and money. So
I always play around when I was a first officer, and the captain was, steering, of course, with either the tiller or the rudder pedals. And I'd start, I'm just helping you out. Stop it.
It's funny because the steering tiller for the Ilyushin IL-62, which is a Russian airliner. It's the Russian version of the VC, Victor Charlie 10, which is a very, very famous British four-engine tail-mounted T-tail airliner. It's a beautiful machine. Well, the Russian version, the steering tiller, is actually a small little steering wheel on the left-hand side that sits on the captain's control yoke. So it's really funny to see the captain taxiing the aircraft around with a little tiny steering wheel. It's really funny. Yeah.
Oh boy, those Russians.
So speaking of natural born pilots, people who have skills, question for you guys, and you can just pat yourselves on the back probably with this, but how many hours before your first solo?
I don't know that. Well, I guess it's sort of applicable to me. Most of my training, with the exception of 3.5 hours, which was just kind of fooling around with one of the other line boys at the Mobile Air Center who happened to be an instructor pilot. It was just kind of a way to get up and, kind of feel what it feels like to fly a small airplane. Other than that, most of my flying, when I went to officer training school, before I started that, I did the flight screening program, and it was in 172s. And I think we only had about maybe 10 to 15 hours.
Something like that. I saw it with 11 hours.
Okay. Yeah.
That was it.
12 and a half, I think.
Oh, so you're just trying to beat us.
Right behind.
No,
I was just curious.
2 hours. I actually soloed. They didn't even actually fly with me at all. They just said, "There's the airplane. Go and fly around the pattern." Okay.
Jeff said, "I got this.
I got this. I can do it."
Put the aviators on, the jacket on. Top Gun plane in the back. Yes.
Oh boy, good question though, Steph. I'm sure that you were well ahead of the curve.
No, I think that's pretty. At least for people I know and have talked to, that's pretty typical. So,
yeah.
If it takes you longer than that, don't be discouraged though. Keep with it.
Yeah, don't be discouraged. If it doesn't come to you right away, don't give up. Don't give up. In fact, many of the people that I flew with as an instructor pilot in the Air Force were people that were very, very close to being eliminated. And I flew with them because I was the assistant flight commander when I first arrived in the training command. And most of them were getting sick. Every time they went up, they were getting sick. And they were very depressed. And they were thinking, this is it. I'm going to have to do something else or just completely leave the Air Force. And every single one of them, I got to, advance on to the T-38 training portion, and they stopped getting sick. And so you have to just keep going for it. Perseverance.
And I guess the T-38 is probably not an easy airplane to fly because you're talking, very fast takeoff and approach speeds, very thin, wings and very. I mean, I've never flown any supersonic type aircraft before, but I can just imagine that from a Tweety Bird to a T-38, from a T-37 to T-38, it's got to be quite the leap.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. It's breathtaking. The difference.
Mm-hmm.
That little T-38 is like a little rocket, and you go through several different sims before you actually go out to the real airplane. And of course you go up for many flights with an instructor pilot doing the basic aerobatic stuff. And then finally they let you go on your own. And I still remember, and I've talked about it before on the show, where, I'm out there with my parachute and my helmet walking out to this T-38 thinking, oh my gosh, I have like 75, 85 hours total time. I don't even have 100 hours. And they're going to let me fly this airplane by myself. And I was like, I can't believe that I'm doing this. I hope I don't kill myself. Anyway, it was a blast, amazing blast. Okay, and then Chris, another question from the chat room. When you get a moment, I had 2 questions. Have drones and or laser pointers ever affected any of you? And what's your least favorite U.S. airport to fly into and out of? We've talked about that before. I don't really have a least favorite anymore. It used to be St. Louis years ago when it was really busy. Now it's like a ghost town. So St. Louis is not a problem at all. And that was basically because of converging courses. And it was just really, really, they were operating way too many flights into that airport at that time with only basically two air carrier runways. And they weren't exactly parallel. But that changed rapidly when TWA went out of business, and then American came in, and it was still pretty busy when American was flying there and took over the TWA assets. But then American decided that, St. Louis is not really, all it's cracked up to be. So they kind of really thinned out things there. But a lot of the airports that people talk about, San Diego, LaGuardia, DCA, I love those airports, all of them. They're a challenge, but not insurmountable. But I know guys that I fly with that will bid away from those airports. They just don't want to have to deal with it. It does get frustrating at LaGuardia, not necessarily the flying into and out of, it's the ground operations there, just dealing with ground control and taxiing and try to get a word in edgewise to try to get out of a ramp area or into a ramp area. It's just it gets my blood pressure even higher than it normally is. But what's your favorite or least favorite airport, Rick?
For me in the States, well, I guess back when I used to fly passengers, we only operated in and out of Miami and New York, and those are pretty good airports to operate in and out of. Everything's pretty standardized, and everybody that flies in and out of there, they're pretty much on their game. A lot of international carriers, so you're pretty much on the same page. But as far as airports overseas that I don't like flying in and out of, and I guess that kind of ties in with the second question, with the lasers there. Anything in southeastern Brazil is kind of a pain in the behind because and this is something that I'll actually brief on the approach briefing part of the flight. When you fly in and out of Campinas or Sao Paulo or even Rio, 8 times out of 10, you'll get a laser pointer, pointed at you. And that is, my feelings about that. If you want to, get me upset, that's one way to do it.
You love it.
I do.
Yay, a laser party.
Yeah. I break out my little disco ball and I hang it from the compass,
Get a little spin.
There you go. Always, and break out my little
the disco music.
Break out my little hula girl and put her on top of the
bottoms.
There you go.
All right.
So, so that, and then also I know and I've talked about this before for some reason, and this happened to me a couple of weeks ago. Well, less than a couple of weeks ago, maybe about a week ago. Again, they vectored us behind. A slow aircraft, and we had to go around, and that wasn't fun. So, it's usually that. They've gotten really good about their English. I mean, their English used to be very, very, subpar, but now, they've really clamped down on that, and they mean business down there. And it's kind of hard to, I kind of understand it because,
That's what she said.
Boom. It's kind of hard. It's kind of easy to understand because I speak two languages, and when you are not a native English speaker, for you to, first learn a language and then to be able to apply that language in an aviation type environment. That's going to be, kind of hard, difficult. But they're doing a good job there. But as far as not liking to fly, airports not liking to fly, that I don't like to fly into, those, because of the lasers and because they always vector you behind some airplane that's doing 80 knots over the ground when you're coming in at 160 knots. So, yeah.
I guess they treat it the same way they do here in the States, where everybody has equal access and equal opportunity and all that kind of stuff.
Well, not really, because we were number one on the approach, and then they broke us off the approach, which is an RNAV, an area navigation GPS type arrival procedure. They vectored us off the approach, and then in comes this, I think it was an ATR, in front of us, and then they give us direct to the final fix of the approach, and I'm putting flaps out like at 50 miles, trying to slow this thing down, and by the time we come in to land, I didn't get a landing clearance until I was about 100 feet off the ground, and by that time I was like, what, the aircraft that preceded me has not vacated the runway yet, and it's not legal for me to land even though I've been given a clearance to land. And so I just went around. Yeah. And that means money, that means time, that means inconvenience, and this is after a 12+ hour flight from Frankfurt, so I wasn't happy.
But the bonus is you get to practice a go-around procedure.
It's interesting, flying a go-around manually on a 777 after flying for 12 hours.
I know. You're not in the mood, are you?
It's fun.
Jennifer in the I'm assuming that it's pronounced Jen Niffer, but Jennifer in the chat room put a little picture of the stairs from a great comedy. I don't know if you guys watch this or not.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorites.
I've been rewatching all the seasons with my son since he's been home from school. And what a fantastic show! It's on Netflix.
Dave put up the picture for Jen.
Oh, I see. Oh, that's for Jen. Okay, the air stairs truck from Arrested.
You're gonna get some hop-ons.
Yeah.
Watch for hop-ons. What is it? Hot ham water.
Yeah.
There's so many. Oh, well, we're getting distracted. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we are.
I should not be looking at the chat room on this thing. Anyway, drones have not affected me yet, although I'm just expecting one of these days, especially since I talk about it all the time in this show, that I'm going to hit one of those darn things. I just know I am. It's just a matter of time. Somebody is going to hit one. Hopefully it won't be a problem. I was flying into New Orleans a couple of weeks ago, and there was a very large bird. It was like one of those turkey vultures or something.
Oh, wow.
Flying right over the Mississippi River. And we were coming in, from the south, landing to the north. And I was looking at that going, whoa, usually it's like a little bit off of your flight path, and you can kind of continue a normal glide slope and a normal localizer track to the runway. But this was going like, I'm thinking I'm going to have to alter my flight path to avoid hitting this thing. Otherwise, it's going to be a big mess and probably cause some pretty significant damage on this airplane. So I had to actually do a little S-turn to avoid the wingspan must have been at least 5 or 6 feet.
Wow.
At least.
That's a big bird.
It was a very, very big bird. Big bird.
Big bird.
Okay. So, Chris, hopefully that answered your questions regarding that. So we need to get, by the way, Rick, you need to keep that thought in mind about putting out flaps and configuring out, 50 miles out, because I think somebody had a question for you regarding that. Stuart, I believe.
All right.
So keep that fresh in your mind, if you don't mind. Joe writes, another possible circuit breaker related accident. And he said, I just returned from 3 days of Airbus recurrent training. Joe Schena, I think, Schena. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, sir. He's an A320 captain. And he just attended 3 days of Airbus recurrent training. We covered this accident in the link below when discussing resetting circuit breakers. It's still unclear after all these years what caused the engine disintegration. However, the timeline makes it easy to come to the conclusion that the circuit breaker reset was at least related. He says, I agree. Resetting fuel pump breakers is a no-no. There wouldn't be any need for it in the Airbus, as all of the fuel except the center tank can be gravity fed. Oh, that's cool. So he sends a link to lessonslearned.faa.gov, and it is regarding a national airlines DC-10 flight number 27 from Miami to San Francisco.
I remember
back
this.
in 1973, years and years, decades before my two co-hosts were even considered to be
Not
existing.
decades.
I know. I'm trying to make it even
Maybe
worse
just
than
one
it is.
decade.
Okay.
Yeah. 8 years.
9 years.
So this flight's, flying, cruising at 39,000 feet. And this is always a problem. If you have some pilots that are bored and they start getting curious about certain things, in the airplane is not the place to do laboratory experimentation.
Nope.
At the time what basically happened is the number 3 inlet and fan case on the number 3 engine separated simultaneously with fan blade liberation. It was the 70s, allowing the blades to impact the airplane at high speed. The liberated blades struck the fuselage right wing engines number 1 and 2 and caused a cabin window to fail. Problem with that is that resulted in the expulsion of one passenger through the opening during rapid decompression. Many passenger oxygen masks failed to deploy, causing a panic among the remaining passengers. The engine debris also caused damage to 2 of the aircraft's 3 hydraulic systems, resulting in loss of all hydraulic fluid for both systems. So what exactly happened here? Well, at the time of the number 3 fan failure, the pilot and flight engineer were experimenting with the relationship between the engine's fan speed, N1, and the automatic flight control systems. The pilot and flight engineer appeared to be curious as to where the autopilot/autothrottle received its engine speed signal. The crew reported that their experiment, quote unquote, was conducted as follows. Autopilot selected in airspeed mode, 257 knots indicated airspeed. The flight engineer pulled circuit breakers for N1 tachometers on engines 1, 2, and 3. Target airspeed reduced by 5 knots. When throttles retarded, the pilot disengaged the autothrottle, and then the crew heard an explosion and then cabin decompression. They declared an emergency and executed an emergency descent. And there are several pictures here showing the GE. What GE engine model is that? Do you know,
C6.
Rick? Okay. And shows the window that was taken out by the fan blades, and it was a big mess. And I can think of some other incidents where the crews kind of decided that they wanted to experiment with something. And trust me, I have been very tempted at times to say, I wonder what would happen if I did this. But then I think about incidents like this one, and I go, nope, not going to be me. I'm not going to be the famous person in Wikipedia that they write about after the airplane crash because I did something really stupid. One of the ones I was thinking about was the 727 that they were putting a little bit of flap out to increase the.
It was a Northwest flight, I think, and the captain for that flight, I think he had suggested to maintenance to actually carve out a little notch just between the flap up position and the flap 1 position so that he could put the flap lever at that position and extend the slat just ever so slightly to be able to get that extra bit of oomph for the performance, which I thought was like when I read that, I was like, really? What? Are you real? Are you serious? So
yeah, I think it actually was a TWA flight.
TWA? Yes, something like that.
Yeah.
It was a 727. Yeah.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, and from what I remember about this, I don't know if it was this incident or not, the flight 841, but I think that the flight engineer was, communication is so important. I think the flight engineer had left the flight deck to use the bathroom or something, and during this time is when they decided to, squeeze out a little bit of flap to, as we mentioned, be a little bit more fuel efficient, but whatever. And he came back in and he noticed that one of the circuit breakers or a couple of circuit breakers were out, and he pushed them in. And that's when the slats came out. So I guess they pulled the circuit breakers for the slat control so that, they could put the flaps out without the slats extending. And, the 727 wing is an amazing wing. All kinds of things on the leading edge of the wing come out. That's like one of the first things that happens when you move the flap handle. And it was a big mess. Anyway, getting off track. Sorry.
Before we moved on, I just wanted to kind of, mention how an emergency descent is flown, because an emergency descent was mentioned on that DC-10 thing, that episode there. And emergency descent is a maneuver that we do when we need to get down to 10,000 feet or the minimum safe altitude because of a decompression. And there are two types of scenarios. One is when the structural integrity of the fuselage is in question, like this case when, because the fuselage itself was punctured because of the uncontained engine failure. And then the other type scenario is when the integrity of the fuselage is not in question, and that would be a failure basically of your outflow valves, which is the valves that control the amount of air that's kept inside the fuselage tube to be able to pressurize the aircraft. So when the fuselage, the structural integrity of the fuselage is in question, the way you fly an emergency descent, and this is again, on the aircraft that I've flown, the 767 and 777. I don't know if it works the same way on the Mad Dog. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to bring the throttles to idle. You're going to do what's called a flight level change, or I guess clamp mode, on the Mad Dog, I think it's what it's called. You basically bring the throttles back to idle. You go to flight level change, and you are descending at the airspeed at which the failure occurred, and you're not accelerating past that airspeed. So you're going to descend at the airspeed that the failure occurred, throttles to idle, speed brake out, and then bring the aircraft down to 10,000 feet or the highest altitude, the lowest altitude that you safely can go down to. And sometimes that might include having to go down in a, kind of step, in step downs to, go around terrain or any other kind of stuff. Now, when the structural integrity of the fuselage is not in question, then you are able to go accelerate all the way to VMO or MMO, which basically is your maximum Mach operating speed or your maximum velocity operating speed. And so again, flight level change, throttles to idle, speed brake out, and with your speed control knob, accelerate, increase the airspeed, and then that way the aircraft is going to pitch for that higher airspeed, giving you a higher rate of descent, getting you down to 10,000 feet in a quicker fashion. And then once you go through 18,000 feet or whatever the transition level is, you request altimeters, you turn your lights on to make sure that people, outside see you. You'll turn your transponder to what's called traffic advisory mode only, TA mode only. And what that's going to do, that's going to keep your traffic collision avoidance system from giving you traffic advisories, keeping you from having to maneuver around aircraft that might be in your vicinity because you are in an emergency type situation. So then once you get down to 10,000 feet, decelerate down to 250 and then, or maintain your high speed if you're in an emergency type situation, and then continue mosey on to your, alternate airport. So that's kind of how you fly that.
Excellent.
Ooh, what do you got there?
Sorry for the distraction.
See,
I muted myself so you wouldn't.
IPA?
Yeah, have you heard of this new beer?
No, I've not
from
seen
Guinness?
that.
I was at my local bottle shop, and I saw this. And I went, "Ooh, what is that?" The Guinness draft in a can kind of system where they have the little
the rocket widget
or whatever in there with a nitrogenated.
Yep.
Beer. Well, they have come out with a nitro IPA.
Ooh,
I'm going to have to look for
very
that.
good.
I did not know it existed.
I didn't either until I saw it, and I thought I have to grab the last 6-pack of this. And it's interesting. It's a balanced IPA. It's not a typical American. Obviously, it shouldn't be an American style IPA. It's an Irish style IPA. And is it any good? Yes, I love of course, the mouthfeel that the nitrogen gives a beer is pretty amazing. And if you're watching the video, I poured it on camera here, and you know how the draft Guinness, when you go to a bar and they, it takes forever for the.
Well, they pour like a third and then another third,
yeah.
and then
I was able to pour the whole can in my nice Airline Pilot Guy pint glass.
Awesome.
We're gonna have to figure out a way to get that running again so that people can get their own their own copy of something like that.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get us off track, but that's part of the charm of the show, I think.
That is the charm. We don't want to talk airplanes. We want to talk beer.
Yeah, I mean, beer, airplanes, and
they're equally important.
what else? You know?
Right?
Barbecue.
Yes, barbecue. Okay. So let's see. So thank you, Rick, for explaining an emergency descent procedure. And let's see. Continuing on, how are you doing on time? Everybody, Dr. Steph, are you still awake?
Yeah, I'm still awake. I'm still with you.
You have to get up early in the morning. I'm sorry. I'm still on vacation, actually.
Not as early as Rick does.
Yeah, Rick has got to get up very early for his flight tomorrow.
I got to be up in 6 hours, but I got everything ready.
But he can do it. You know, he can sleepwalk.
I can't sleep. That's what autopilot's for.
He is that good. I mean, we talked about it, before being a natural pilot. Rick is a natural.
Yes.
So anyway, so let's continue on with Steve. He said, can you further address the topic of Codeshares, fee for departure contracts, and scope in our current mainline/regional airline model? I agree that the industry will right itself in the near future. Oh, you know what? I skipped one, didn't I? Well, we'll go back to that other one.
That's okay.
Due to the lack of pilots, and I also feel that the current model is broken. As airline pilots, we have done a disservice to ourselves by allowing this type of bottom-feeding, cutthroat competition at the regional level. It's no good for careers. It is no good for passengers. It's no good for the companies that are represented. In my personal opinion, if it says Acme Airlines on the side, it should be flown by an Acme pilot, not by Joe Blow Airlines flying as the Acme connection. Here, I do agree, Steve. The regional airlines treat their employees as substandard employees. I agree with that as well. As you said, they have to maintain the cheapest operation possible. The line of what is a regional route and what is a mainline route has been blurred, as you pointed out. How can this be fixed in the near future? What role do we have as pilots? What role do we play as pilots? Well, I know that in the world that I'm in, where many of the major airlines here in the U.S. are represented by unions. We're union members, and we negotiate our contracts with our union representation. And I'd say that the unions really are definitely for fixing this problem. And many unions have said, the union that Acme is part of, is the Airline Pilots Association, has said for many, many years that, it's one level of safety for everyone. It should be, I don't know if I'm explaining myself very well. It should be, a seamless system, that the safety aspects of the operation should apply, whether you're a connection carrier or a regional carrier or not. Pilots should be paid a living wage, and pilot pay and benefits should match the level of investment that people put in to get to where they are, and the risk that they take, and the effect that it has on their family life, et cetera, because you're gone a lot in this world of flying, professional aviation. So I think that the unions are doing a lot of that work to try to get this thing fixed. Where do I see this going in the future? I personally think that eventually we're going to get to the point where the airlines are basically going to, that regional mainline kind of model here in the United States is going to disappear, and that it's just all going to be Acme Airlines, American Airlines, United Airlines, Delta Airlines, whatever, and from the smallest markets to the largest markets, it's all going to be flown by the same pilot group. I could be wrong about that. I hope I'm not.
I agree with you, but it's going to be a while before. I feel like it's going to be a while before.
Yeah,
I was just saying, so just to make sure I understand, you think the regional model is going to disappear at some point?
Well, I mean, if you have to pay the regional pilots, if you have to bring the pay up to par, then why not mainline have do the flight? So it's going to get to the point where the regionals are not going to be able to get those contracts because it's going to be too expensive for the mainline carrier to pay for those contracts because the pay is now the same. So,
I guess is it profitable then for the mainline carrier to do those flights that the regional carriers were doing?
Yeah, but it's all economics. It's that point at which, as you just said, the fee for departure carriers are going to say, hey, we can't attract anybody to fly these airplanes anymore, and we have to pay them this X amount of dollars per hour. And so now our costs for flying that you want us to fly for a cut rate isn't going to happen because we just can't fly the airplanes because we can't, we're not paying people enough. And so that's the point at which I think the main carriers say, okay, there's no point in, hiring you or contracting you to fly the smaller markets and feed our mainline system. We'll just do it all. But I don't know. I could be very wrong about that. And you're right, Rick. If it does happen, it's probably going to take quite some time because nothing ever happens quickly in this industry. I mean, I don't know. You don't remember this because it was back in 1978 when the Civil Aeronautics Board, was dissolved and they deregulated the airline industry. And many people thought that it was just going to be a matter of just a few years with all this consolidation and everything else. And it took a long time, a couple decades before we even started to see any sign of that. So who knows? We should probably make some predictions. Maybe we should do that on our episode 200. Make some predictions for the year in aviation.
That's
I'm going to have to go get a crystal ball somewhere.
Yeah, get your crystal balls, and then well, never mind. I'm not going to play that. Okay. So good question there, Mr. Steve. And then he also sent in some feedback regarding he's currently learning the benefit and cruciality of checklists the hard way. I've spent 8+ years flying at my regional airline using one checklist. There have been some slight modifications throughout the years, but for the most part, it was all the same. I admit there were times when I fell into the rote rut of checklist reading, not actually verifying the items. That happens. But just a few weeks ago, my airline completely changed our standard operating procedures and gutted our checklists, all in the name of safety. While there were some changes needed and procedures updated, the rollout and implementation has been atrocious. While this has caused us to slow down our checklist reading since we don't know it, we must seem like bumbling idiots to any jump seaters we have on board. The major problem with the rollout was that the changes were not highlighted or explained. Yeah, so that is a problem. It's one thing to change all your operating procedures and your checklists, et cetera, but you need to make it clear what was changed. You have to highlight those. You have to communicate that and explain it, because there are going to be people that are going to be hesitant to change their ways unless they have a reasonable explanation for it. Most of the changes we had to search for were and were quite shocked to find that they had been removed or that things were added. Our cockpit is filled with a lot of, they changed that? Really? What for? And the things that they needed to change, they didn't. I'm sure in time things will get better and make more sense. But for right now, my standard briefing to my first officers is, if at any point we have a question about our new procedures, no matter where we are, we will stop and look it up before proceeding. So I will now publicly apologize to anyone stuck behind a CRJ stopped on the taxiway at O'Hare during the morning rush. But, that's the right way to look at it, Steve. You got to, oops, sorry, just hit my microphone. You have to slow the operation down because safety is the priority. And, there's some confusion about the proper use of checklists and, making sure that everything is in the right position and all that. You just got to do what you have to do.
And also, if you stop a checklist at, halfway, don't pick up where you left off, start over.
Yeah. In all your years of flying, have you ever seen a complete rewrite of an SOP and had to experience this? No, luckily, it's been little changes here and there. And we always kind of joke around that, especially when we were flying the 727, that airplane had been around since the 60s. And here we are in the 90s, and they're coming out with new checklist procedures. And we're going, really? I think
there's
they
always
probably
room for improvement. Always.
figured that out. Well, what happens is guys, they get promoted to like different management positions, and they got to kind of make their name and change things. And so, it's been working just fine for so many years, and somebody says, hey, I have a good idea. And that's kind of one of the reasons why this kind of stuff happens. But again, there are other good reasons for it to happen, because a lot of times, we'll see some kind of an incident or accident, and they'll take they'll analyze the whole thing and go, you know what, we're lucky that it hasn't happened to us. And so let's take a look at this and figure out a way to keep this from happening at Acme Airlines. And maybe one of those changes is to change a procedure and or a checklist procedure or whatever. So, and many of the things that we see in the simulator at different times probably have something to do with something that happened at another air carrier, or maybe even our own. And they were concerned about it enough to say, we need to expose our crews to this, because it could have been us.
I can think of one thing. I remember for a long time at our airline, our procedure for configuring the aircraft for takeoff, we would wait up until we were cleared to line up and wait to put the flaps in the takeoff position. And I never understood why you would do that. Why wait so long? And I guess the rationale behind that type of procedure was because, well, if and for those of you guys and gals who are familiar with cold weather operations, that's kind of what you're supposed to do, because, or at least that's the way we did it at our airline, because you don't want any slush or ice or any of that stuff to get caught in the flap and track mechanisms and all that. So you basically keep the aircraft with the flaps up until you are ready for takeoff, and then that way the flaps are clean and you have a clean wing to go flying. And so, one day we had an incident where the crew just basically forgot to extend the flaps for takeoff, and then they got this takeoff configuration alarm warning, and they go, "Whoops, the flaps are not down." So they had to abort the takeoff, and taxi the aircraft off the runway, and then wait for the brakes to cool, and then line up for takeoff again. And then after that, the procedure was implemented that the flaps would be put in the takeoff position before the initial taxi to the runway, regardless of what the conditions were outside. So things like
I just celebrated 27 years at Acme Airlines on December 15th, and I can tell you that procedure that you're talking about has come and gone over the years, where we'd always configure for takeoff and try to minimize the amount of ice, slush, all that kind of stuff being collected by the flaps. And then there was a point at which we'd wait until we were almost in takeoff position before we actually put our takeoff configuration into place. And then they decided that the risk versus benefit model, that's what safety is, didn't support doing that anymore, and they thought it would be better to risk having the slush and stuff in the flaps and put the takeoff configuration out immediately before starting taxiing. So it's interesting to see that over the years, how things come and go. He says, speaking of getting in a rut or a triggered response, I once flew with a captain, and his initial briefing told me, quote, "I don't do any of that clear left, clear right bull crap." I was quite flummoxed by that statement, but he explained that most first officers are triggered to respond clear right when he said clear left. That is true, without even looking to see if their side was indeed clear. As a captain, I have sort of adopted the same idea. I just don't brief it like that. I just tell them the story of this captain, and we all have a good laugh. But the point gets across. So, yeah. So when you say clear left, they're probably thinking clear.
Yeah, clear right.
I should probably look out to the right side. Oh, yeah, it is clear.
Clear right. Really? Clear right?
Really? Okay.
Your other right.
Sure.
Your other right.
I don't do it to make a point. I just kind of do it because, I'm the one that's going to get in trouble if I ding something with my right wing. So even though he says clear right, I'm still looking over there going,
oh, yeah.
I'm making sure that there's nothing over there that I'm going to hit.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I've ever gotten close to doing that.
No, I mean, neither.
Okay. This from this is from a couple folks. First Officer Jeff Felmuth and Mike Dell sent in a link to this story, and this is unbelievable. Did you guys have a chance to look at this?
I did read this.
Yeah, me too.
You want to read it, Steph?
Sure. So.
Oh wait, do we want to go? Wait, before we do that,
do you want to go back?
Let's
because otherwise we're going to forget. We'll just keep going.
Yeah, I almost forgot again. XNA Nick also sent in a piece of feedback regarding the NTSB full investigation notes for the US Air 1702 accident at Philadelphia last year. And I talked a little bit about it on the last show, but he has a link to a really great blog called Inner Airmanship. You should check it out if you haven't already. It's called innerairmanship.com by, let's see, the guy's name is Dave somebody here. Let me see, Dave English. And basically the point of his blog is saying that, flying is more than just manipulating controls. It's almost a spiritual experience, or can be. And that's really not doing a service at all to his whole point about the inner, the inner aspect of airmanship. Being an airman is much more than just being a pilot. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I totally get you. Okay. I agree with you even.
Anyway, on his blog, on his blog, he talks about this incident that the NTSB had just released the full investigative notes on the U.S. Airways Flight 1702 at 3:20 taking off from Philadelphia International Airport. And basically, again, we talked about it where they were going out for takeoff. They the wrong takeoff, and how many times have we heard that recently? The wrong runway was entered in the performance data computer, and when they were on the way out, I think the captain looked down and realized it just a few minutes before they were going to be taking off that the wrong runway data was in the FMS, and so he directed the first officer to correct that. And apparently it wasn't corrected, and so they started their takeoff and realized during the takeoff, because in the Airbus 320, I think this was.
Yeah, it's a 320.
They at the start of the takeoff roll, when the Airbus spoke up its warning about the lack of V speeds, the audible alarm saying "retard, retard," the pilots decided to ignore it. And so here's a little excerpt from the cockpit voice recorder: "Retard. Retard. What did you do? You didn't load. We lost everything. Retard. 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 Retard." It keeps on going. We'll get this straight when we get airborne. So they continued the takeoff. Instead of stopping, immediately they knew something was wrong. Okay, the right thing to do at this point would have said, okay, let's do what the airplane is suggesting that we do. Pull the power back to idle, retard the throttles, tell tower, hey, we need to check something out. We're aborting our takeoff. Do the paperwork, answer the questions to the chief pilot and everything else, and then, go home. Call it,
And then you get to fly another day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So instead of doing that, he decides that, well, we're just going to figure this out once we get airborne. And it continues to go on. Retard. What? I'm sorry. I think that must have been from the first officer. And then at some point, the captain decides, after the airplane's in the air, that, well, maybe we shouldn't fly. He gets this sense that the airplane is not airworthy at this point. And he's second guessing his decision to continue the takeoff. So he basically aborts the takeoff after the airplane is airborne, which is a big no. You don't do that. And they collapsed the nose gear and I think ripped one of the engines off or did significant damage. I don't know I guess the engine stayed on this thing looking at this picture. No injuries, but they had to do an evacuation. I don't think there were any injuries. Maybe there were. Basically destroyed this airplane. I don't think they can use
the aircraft is cashed, I think. And the interesting thing about this is that oh, how they wish they could have the last 30 seconds back, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
When, and so, I mean,
Well, did you see the part too where there may have been some medical issues involved too, where the captain reported for duty without, he was, so it says the captain reported for duty without allowing the FAA recommended time to pass after taking 2 prescription medications. And for the record, these are not just prescription medications. They're typically only administered during procedures or just before procedures. Midazolam is a sedating drug, also known as Versed. That's the one that they give you, that it's a barbiturate, and it kind of makes everything before your procedure hazy so you don't remember it a whole lot. And then fentanyl is a very strong narcotic pain medication. So those were the 2 medications that he had not allowed enough time to elapse between having those in his system and reporting for duty.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that stuff when I was reading the actual investigative.
So it sounds like he had some sort of medical procedure at some point, because that's really the only time you would take those 2 medications in combination. It's a very commonly used combination of medications before, small surgical procedures.
Wow, it's amazing.
Well, as Dave in his blog says, it's better to look a little stupid now than a lot stupid later. That's the moral to this story, I guess.
And there's a little checklist that I do, and I'm sure you guys and gals have heard about it. It's called I'm Safe, and basically you break it down. IMSAFE. I is for illness, M medication, S for stress, A for alcohol, F for fatigue, and E for emotion. If you have any of those factors affecting your ability to fly, then maybe you shouldn't be flying. And medication is included in that list. So
does that include meth?
I mean, I don't know. Are you talking about air traffic controllers?
Well, I guess. Steph, are you ready to read this one from Mike Dell and First Officer Jeff Felmuth?
Sure. So this was going back to beginning of this month. An air traffic controller who once bungled a flight carrying Michelle Obama has landed in trouble when he was caught driving on Long Island with illegal guns and crystal meth, which he said he smokes to stay awake. So this gentleman who works at a major New York City control area in Westbury was nabbed Wednesday night on drug and weapons charges during a traffic stop in wherever that is in Long Island.
Wantagh? I don't know.
Can't pronounce that town name either. So cops stopped his FJ Cruiser for illegal window tint and failure to signal, but he told them there was a loaded handgun behind a seat and another in the rear cargo area. So apparently he's just freely giving out this information. During the stop, the cops also recovered meth from his pants pocket. He said, that's meth. I smoke it to stay awake. I'm an air traffic controller. He was a FAA employee since 1991.
Not no more.
No.
Apparently meth makes you very honest.
Very honest. Honest to a fault, yeah. And so it says he was transferred to from the Warrenton, Virginia Air Traffic Control Center several years ago after the incident with the First Lady's plane. And he was retrained and assigned to the New York Terminal Radar Approach Control, TRACON, in Westbury, which controls flights into and out of JFK, LaGuardia, and other area airports.
Yeah, because, why not put him in the most, the busiest piece of...
Those aren't very busy,
airspace in the world.
It's okay. He's on meth. He's awake.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And he has guns. Loaded weapons.
And
his heavily tinted windowed FJ
Cruiser.
Yeah, which is a really cool car, by the way.
Yeah. Do you read the other? So, the FAA.
So what happened in April of 2011?
Yeah, so in April 2011, Peck was directing a plane carrying the First Lady and Jill Biden on approach to Andrews Air Force Base, allowing it to get too close to the wake turbulence of a military cargo plane. The White House plane aborted its landing. And then a year earlier, he also directed a United Airlines flight that almost collided with a smaller jet carrying a Wisconsin congressman, prompting the United pilot to say, that was close. And so he was charged with criminal possession of a weapon, criminal possession of a controlled substance, and numerous vehicle and traffic law violations.
He now works at the Chicago TRACON.
That's right.
Yes. Let's get him out of the way and working something that's not too busy.
Yeah. And Dave in the chat room has put up the classic, looks like I picked the wrong week to quit amphetamines.
Man.
That's what this guy was wishing. I picked this week to quit.
Crazy, crazy, crazy. Well, up next is some audio feedback from Taj, answering that question that we had about what are these unmanned balloons in Brazil? What is that all about? Oops. You're not going to hear that because I'm going to have to play it from over here.
G'day guys, Captain Jeff, my American and Dr. Steph. It's Taj here again, the first officer from Brazil. I'd like to start by thanking you for the great show and thank you for playing the last voice feedback I sent. And that was back in episode 193. On that voice feedback, I spoke about unmanned hot air balloons. And you guys didn't seem to know what that was all about. Unmanned hot air balloons that we do have down here are similar to weather balloons, except for the fact that they don't have any purpose other than the people that let them up. They just want to watch them go up and down, and they carry fireworks. And when they get to certain altitude, they set off those fireworks. So they watch them going off, and when they come down, they cause a lot of danger. They cause bushfires, and when they're up in the sky, they cause danger to aviation. That's it, you know. The next thing I would like to, if I can, ask Dr. Steph, it's about overnight flights. Like, I notice I've been flying a lot of red-eye flights lately, and I noticed that I get very hungry during overnight flights. I don't know if that's a normal thing or it's just with me, but I think if I flew a lot of them, I would put on a lot of weight because I get really, really hungry. I don't know if that happens, like in Miami Rig, for instance, fly a lot of overnight flights, and like more than tired, I get hungry. And I don't know, maybe it's because our body's used to be sleeping at that time. Is normally resting that during that time, and it's because it's flying, it's working. Maybe it's the reaction, it's a normal reaction of our body. So if Dr. Steph could explain that would be cool. Thank you. And the last thing I would like to hear is about EFB, especially from Captain Jeff. The Mad Dog that you fly, Captain Jeff, does it have EFB? Because some of the aircraft that I fly down here in my airliner, the first ones that we received, they don't have EFBs. And man, you know, those electronic flight bags, they make our life so much easier. It's unbelievable. That's all for today, guys. Thanks a lot, and have a good one. Good day.
Okay, so the unmanned hot air balloons have really no purpose. Good. We understand that now.
Yep.
So now
Except for setting out fireworks. Yeah. That's a purpose.
There's lasers and balloons now. Great.
Yeah. Well, thank you for clearing up that one. Dr. Steph, he had a question about late night flights and eating. Is there some physiological reason for all that?
So that's a good question. And really the only kind of tie-in that I'm aware of that's related to this actually has more to do with sleep deprivation and some of the hormones in our system that drive hunger and appetite suppression. There are some studies out there, and this kind of all ties into sleep hygiene and whatnot. But basically, if you look at people who are chronically sleep deprived or not even chronically sleep deprived, some of these changes can happen with some of these signaling hormones and peptides, even after just one night of not enough sleep, or one 24-hour period of not enough sleep. But basically what happens is two things. There's a hormone called lutein, I believe, and ghrelin, and those are two of the main ones that are basically controlling whether you feel full or whether you are hungry. So after just one night of sleep deprivation, the one that controls satiety, or lutein, goes down, and the one that controls hunger or drives hunger, ghrelin, goes up. So there's some thought that there's a relation there. So people who have poor sleep hygiene are, up all night contributes to overeating and weight gain in that sense. Now, if you're getting normal sleep and still flying overnight or red-eye flights and still having that problem, there might be some other factors at play there. I'm not sure. I didn't have a chance to look into, how that ties into some of the other hormones controlling sleep-wake cycles and whatnot, but I suspect that there's connections there as well.
Does that kind of jive with your experience, Rick? Do
you know what?
Hungry?
It's funny because it's true. When I fly, well, because there's a difference between flying red eyes and I guess flying extended periods of time across several time zones on what would be a red eye flight at your destination. So, but going back to just the basic, I guess, structure of the question, it does happen to me, and I've just after doing this for so long, I've just come to realize that I guess as I should just do what my body is asking me to do, because I found that if I am hungry and I don't eat, I suffer from a little bit of acid reflux. And if I don't eat, then I start feeling that. And it's, very, very uncomfortable. And so, but then again, I also, watch what I eat. I try to, I'm one of those pilots that actually packs his little tiny duffel bag with stuff from home. So I'll take, chia seeds, I'll take almonds, I'll take, beef jerky, I'll take protein bars. I'll take, I'll go to the supermarket wherever, the layover is going on. And then I'll buy, bananas and apples and keep my, an intake of food every couple hours so that I don't get to the point where I am feeling hungry and then, feeling that acid reflux starting to bother me. But as Taj mentions, that does happen to me as well. So
the other thing that happens to me if I don't answer that call to eat, that pretty much takes over all of the thoughts in my brain. It's like I'm hungry, and I find that work performance and just cognitive abilities tend to suffer too. So if you are hungry, by all means, eat. If your body's telling you you're hungry for a reason, but yes, it is driven by these hormones, and it does seem to have some effect. Or there is some effect on those hormones based on your sleep-wake cycles and crossing time zones and sleep deprivation and all of that. So
plus it'd be kind of weird if, you get an instruction from ATC to descend down to 10,000 feet and you answer back barbecue.
Exactly.
So, unless you're flying into Kansas City.
There you go.
And I, like you, Rick, bring my own food, Cheez-Its, salami sticks, and other really good food.
Those are high in sodium now.
High in salt and fat.
There you go.
That's what I'm looking for. All right. And then the last thing he talked about was the electronic flight bags. And yes, Acme Airlines implemented electronic flight bags, I think more than a year ago, or how long have we had these things now?
I feel like a little bit over a year ago.
Yeah.
Something
showed
like
it to me
that.
back in when I don't even remember what that was.
Yeah, we use Surface
Beginning of this year.
2 tablets using an ARM processor, which is really underpowered for what it needs to do. And it really starts showing more as time goes on and more stuff is loaded into our electronic flight bag. We use the Jeppesen Flight Deck Pro app that was on the iPad, the iOS, for quite some time. And when Acme decided that we were going to go with Microsoft hardware, Jeppesen ported it to the Microsoft, the Windows world, Windows RT world. The rumors are at my airline that we are going to get new hardware next year, and it's going to be at least, the rumors are like the Surface 3 Pro tablet with a real Intel chip and a real Windows operating system. So that should help with responsiveness.
Kind of what I have right now.
Yeah, what you're using right now.
Cool.
So, although, I think they just released the Surface 4,
yep.
But, we're never going to be right, at the edge of technology. We're always going to be a little bit behind, I guess. But who knows? I could be wrong. In fact, somebody I was just flying with said that they had heard that we were going to get something completely different, like not even a Surface. So I don't know. I'm not in that group of people that has all that knowledge about that kind of stuff. I'm just a guy that does a podcast with a couple of other experts in aviation. So, so that's, we've had the EFB, and you're right, it does make life easier. And there's still some aspects that, we kind of miss with the old paper stuff. It's not perfect, the electronic flight bag, but it's got a lot of advantages. And the latest version of the Flight Deck Pro that we're using at Acme actually has the ability to overlay radar and other weather data, although we still can't use it while we're actually flying, airborne. And but again, the rumor is that that's going to change in the future, and that we're going to be able to get that while we're actually flying. So it won't be just the people sitting back behind the cockpit door that have access to all that good information that we are not allowed to tap into. We're actually going to be able to use that as well. So
what kind of delay is there between I guess what you get presented in your EFB to what's actually going on outside?
Like with the NexRad
versus the radar that you have on board.
I think it's about a 4 or 5 minute.
5 minutes probably.
Like yeah.
Okay. So about 50 miles out and you're good. I mean, you kind of.
Yeah. This is, of course they're not going to take our forward looking radar systems out. So that's just going to augment what we already have. So that 5 minute delay is really not going to be, it's more for the big picture, and planning ahead in time. And the forward looking radar that we are currently using and have been using for many, many years is what we're going to rely upon to get around weather systems and that kind of stuff in real time. All right. So anything else before we, you guys still awake? We want to go a little bit more?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. How about, are you ready, Rick?
Oh man. Okay. Bring it on. What do you got?
Okay. Stuart sent a Word document. And so I had to fire up my Microsoft Word for Mac to read this sucker. But I went ahead and copied it and pasted it in our Evernote so that we could all read it. He said, he said, cue the Ricketts, Jeff.
Oh, no.
This one's for the Boeing man, the Rickopedia. As you know, I'm flying the professional 737-800 by PMDG. It's an add-on for FSX, and it's the best add-on I've ever purchased. In a word, phenomenal, both on the eye and to the ear. I'm picking on Rick as he's the Boeing man and has kindly agreed to help me out with this via Skype. It would seem there are quite a few similarities between the big, heavy Boeing metal and the baby Boeing 737, so I'm quite hopeful Rick is the man for the job. Of course he is. I've always flown the default FSX 737, so I was already reasonably familiar with this aircraft prior to upgrading to the professional flight deck. However, the professional version, as you might imagine, has been a huge learning curve, which I've really enjoyed. It's left me with a number of how-to or why's that type of questions. I've included a few screenshots to help explain what I'm asking. So without further ado, here we go. My first question is related to stacking, and I think he's talking about holding. Mm-hmm. I've learned how to enter and exit a stack, either at position or at a published VOR. But my question is how to manage my altitude within the holding pattern. Do I modify the CDU in some way, or do I use the MCP, the mode control panel, such as altitude level change or altitude intervene?
Okay, so let's start answering those one by one, and we'll try to do it, expeditiously here. So as far as managing your descent while in a holding pattern, you have to keep in mind that you're not the only aircraft out there. So in real life, if you were to descend using flight level change, that means that the aircraft would descend with the throttle at idle while holding the speed at which you pressed the flight level change button, which would give you a higher than 1,000 feet per minute descent. And usually when you get cleared from one level in the holding pattern to another level in the holding pattern, it's usually just 1,000 foot descent. And so to basically be a good neighbor and to not trigger other aircraft's traffic collision avoidance systems, what I do is just basically enter a descent in vertical speed and use a 500 foot per minute descent. And then once I do that, I'll update my new cruise altitude in the control display unit, because that way the flight management computer is able to give me an accurate fuel prediction based on the entered expect further clearance time. So that's what I got for that one.
Okay. So basically, the vertical aspect of this is separate from the horizontal control of the holding pattern.
Right. Even though you're basically controlling the interface between you and the way the aircraft is flying, the holding pattern is a page of the FMC called, appropriately called the hold page. And so in there you have your holding altitude, your best holding airspeed based on your weight, the EFC time, which is the expect further clearance time given to you by ATC, and based on that, the FMC is going to be able to figure out what your maximum holding or loitering time is based on your minimum diversion fuel. And so you have all those factors in the hold page of the FMC. And so to manage the vertical aspect of that hold, you obviously have to enter your new altitude into the MCP, the mode control panel, because the airplane, even though you have selected an altitude on the CDU of your on the control display unit of the flight management computer, that altitude will not become active until you select it up on the mode control panel, because that's the fail-safe up there. The aircraft will not move unless you change that altitude up there.
What? It doesn't automatically do everything, including putting out the gear and the flaps and all that?
No, pilots, we have to fly a little bit.
What?
Believe it or not.
That's crazy. He says, secondly, I've noticed that these green dashes appear on the navigation display, the ND. See the picture. And I'm not entirely sure what this green line represents. Of course, we all know what the green line represents.
We're going green.
Oh, yeah.
We're going green. We're gonna
Had to get that in.
Yep. That
Just
means
under
that
2 hours.
That means that if you follow that line, it's the cheapest, most economical way. No, I'm just kidding. It's not. Basically, those
What is that? I've never seen that.
Basically, those green lines are bearing lines, and those lines are basically, if you go to the fix page, there's a page on your control display unit that says fix. So you can enter a fix, and you can enter a bearing from that fix, and those lines represent that bearing from whatever fix you have selected in your fix page. I believe the 737, just as the 767 did, has only 2 fix pages. The 777 has 4. But it's basically that. It's just a bearing line off of a fix that you have pre-selected in your fix page on there on your CPU.
We have 2 fix pages as well, and if you just enter the fix, you don't get that green line. But if you enter like a radial or a bearing in addition to the fix, then or you can hit the thing that says a beam. We'll do that a lot for position reports.
Exactly. And not only that, but I mean, you can select a fix. You can select obviously a fix. You can select a bearing, and you can select an arc around that fix. So, for example, I use that quite a bit when flying ETOPS. So I will select the airport, my initial drift down alternate, and I'll set that in my fix page. And then I'll put an arc of 458 nautical miles, which is our distance arc based on our engine out speed at 10,000 feet, whatever, to get to our ETOPS airport. So I know that wherever that green arc intersects my flight path is where the ETOPS portion of the flight begins, and I'll back that up with an actual latitude and longitude position on another fixed page to make sure that the arc coincides with the lat-long position of the entry to the ETOPS portion of the flight and the exit from the ETOPS portion of the flight on the other side. So that's how that works.
Oh, cool. Mm-hmm. What I do mostly with that fix page, because I don't usually mess with the position reports, usually my first officer takes care of all that. When we're getting closer to the destination, I'll always enter in the fix page the actual ILS identifier, and then I'll put the reciprocal of the front course also on that page, and then it draws a green line. Basically, that's my localizer depiction on my navigation display, and that way I can make an active waypoint on one of the fixes on the approach, and I can go direct to that fix and give myself some vertical descent information. Now, I would imagine on your fancy airplane, it probably does all that automatically. But
yeah, it does it for you. But and Dave is mentioning that you can set up an ad hoc ILS approach with that. I mean, yeah, kind of like what Captain Jeff said. You can set the on the legs page of the flight management computer or the CDU. You can select the runway, set that on fix, and then set a reciprocal course from that and kind of track that. You can't track it in lateral navigation though. You would have to track it with track select. And the difference between head and select and track select, which is a feature that we have in the 777, is that if you fly with head and select, then the system is not going to correct for wind. If you fly in track select, then the aircraft is going to correct for wind and drift. So you're going to be flying a track instead of a heading. Another reason why I use fix, and I just thought about it off the top of my head now, is when flying visual approaches or flying I guess circle to land procedures. I'll set the runway on fix, and I'll use that to calculate a 3-to-1 glide ratio. And basically, based on my distance to that runway on that fixed page, multiply that times 3, and that's how high I should be. So if I am 3 miles away from that fix, I should be at 900 feet. If I'm 4 miles, at 1,200 feet. If I'm at 5 miles, 1,500 feet, and so on and so forth. So it's there to. I know. Can you imagine, pilots flying airplanes?
How are you doing that math without a calculator?
It's just my hamster in his wheel going.
Hamster in your pants,
squeaking.
Okay. So basically, Stuart, the reason why you're seeing those green lines, those green hashed lines on your navigation display, is because either the program that you're using has already set up something in the fixed page, or you probably didn't do it.
No.
So
but just go to the fixed page and see if there's a fix pre-selected and if there's a bearing from that fix. And, just if you don't want them there, just, erase them. And if
it has no bearing at all what we're talking about here. I'm sure that there's a... There we go. Moving on, he says, not me. I always see DECEL, decel, on the ND flight plan as I'm well into my descent. See the picture. I'm guessing this stands for decelerate. If so... Is the FMC asking me to decelerate by starting to configure for landing, or is the FMC telling me something else?
Okay, so that decel is specific to the 737. On the 777, you don't have a point there that says decel. On the 777, we have. If you look at the picture, that's and that's going to be on the show notes, I'm sure. There are 2 little green dots along the magenta line, and basically what that means is that the aircraft estimates that based on the vertical construction of your descent path, and the way the vertical descent path is figured out by the FMC is backwards from the runway to your cruise altitude, not from the cruise altitude down to the runway. So there's a point that crosses 50 feet over the threshold of that runway, and starting from that point, the FMC will build that descent path backwards based on winds aloft, which you will load on your descent forecast winds page, which is on the VNAV page, VNAV descent page of your FMC, and also on a line there that's on the VNAV descent page as well, and that says speed transition. And usually in the United States, and just about everywhere else in the world, you want to fly at 250 knots below 10,000 feet. So if you have that selected in your VNAV descent page, then the FMC is going to figure out where that deceleration point needs to happen. And so if you fly the descent in VNAV, which is what you should do, VNAV means vertical navigation, then when you get to that point there, the aircraft is going to automatically not pitch nose up, but reduce the rate of descent, and then command a deceleration to 250 knots. And then once you get to 250 knots, the aircraft will resume its normal descent at 250 knots. Now, if you notice, to the right side of that screen, there is a vertical scale there, and that is your vertical deviation scale. In this particular case, you see the little magenta diamond. It's at the bottom part of it, and it says 558, I believe. That means that at that point in this screen grab, you are 558 feet above the path. So you are almost 600 feet above where you need to be. So what I would do in that case is, perhaps increase the airspeed slightly to recapture that descent path, or maybe deploy a little bit of speed brakes to increase your rate of descent to be able to recapture that VNAV path descent and have the aircraft decelerate at its deceleration point. Those points there are going to move along the track. If you would stay high on the profile as you are, then your deceleration point is going to move further down the line. But that means that you are eventually going to just, be, high on the approach, and you're going to have to do a little bit of maneuvering to get down to be able to maneuver and configure the aircraft for a landing. So that's what I got on that.
So basically what the nav display is telling you when you've programmed all this information is that, it's making its own calculations about, this is where I think that you should start decelerating. This is where I think you should start your descent based on the information that you've put in to my computer.
Exactly. And, so as we said, winds aloft and the weight of the aircraft, the zero fuel weight, the fuel on board. And so it figures out, at this point, based on this information is when I think you should begin your deceleration at 10,000 to 250 knots.
And, so we use this as a tool, or this is the way you should be using it. Don't use this as the gospel truth, because it's based on all these ideal conditions or the data that you've given it. But, you're flying into New York City airspace, and you have to keep in mind that you've built this whole thing based on 300 knots and the descent, and the winds being a certain way. And guess what, a lot of times the winds are a little bit stronger, a little bit more of a tailwind, or approach control, things start getting bunched up a little bit, and they go, what, we're going to have to decelerate you to 250 knots. Well, exactly. If you have based everything on what your computer is basically telling you should do, and you haven't, considered that you're going to have to change this descent profile a little bit, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to be in trouble here. So that's why the human brain has to look at this whole scenario and say, what, I appreciate what you're trying to tell me here, but, and of course it depends on the airplane you're flying. The more modern airplanes are doing a better job of calculating all these deceleration and descent points and everything else, but it's not time for you to turn your brain off and say, what, I'm just going to do whatever it tells me blindly.
Exactly right. And two more things before we move on with this question. One thing is that if you're flying this on VNAV path and your speed, so, Captain Jeff mentioned the fact that you might have a higher tailwind component than initially, calculated. If your airspeed gets to VNAV speed plus 15, then you're going to get an advisory from the FMC telling you that you need to put in speed brakes, because if you get 15 knots fast on your target speed, you're going to get a drag required advisory. If you get 15 knots slow on your speed, which is, basically maybe you have a stronger headwind component than you thought, then if you get 15 knots slower, then the auto throttle is going to kick in and bring you back to your speed there. And then another thing, as Captain Jeff was mentioning, this is not a time to turn your brain off and just blindly give yourself to the auto flight director system and hope that it's doing a good job. I have several gates that I use based on my distance to the airport, how high I should be and how fast I should be going. And one fail safe that has never failed me, part of the redundancy, is 40 miles from the airport, 10,000 feet, 250 knots. That never fails.
And that's pretty conservative, but and sometimes it's better to be conservative than be surprised and have to use full speed brakes and give a bad ride to your passengers just to try to make some of these altitude constraints.
Exactly right.
Is that very depending on size of aircraft too, or how?
Of course. I mean, inertia is quite a big factor when you have an airplane that, that at landing weighs, 270 tons, then it's, inertia is something that's going to be taken into account with these FMC built descent.
You don't want to get behind on that either.
Oh, no. I mean, you can't. Oh, absolutely.
That's part of it. But, it also, a lot of it depends on the way the aircraft is designed. There are some airplanes that are very, very slick, and, it's hard to get it slowed down and get it to come down. And sometimes it doesn't really jive exactly with being heavy or lighter airplane. Like, for instance, I've never flown the 757. They say that, it's a very slick airplane. It's hard to get it slowed down. And Boeing allows on that airplane, in the 76 and maybe the 777 as well, speed brake deployment with the flaps out as well. On my airplane, that's a no-no. We can't use the spoilers or the slats. I mean, the speed brake when we have any kind of flap configuration.
We can use speed brake up to and including flap 15, which is kind of what I use sometimes, because, as you said, the 777 is a very, very sleek airplane. It's got a lot of inertia. It's a very heavy, very clean, supercritical wing. So it's an airplane that just wants to keep on flying. And the 767, when they put the winglets on that thing, man, I mean, that thing did not want to slow down. So you kind of had to, account for that. And so, the flight crew training manual says that you are allowed to use speed brake up to and including flap 15, not flap 20 though. But interestingly enough, the reference speed for flap 15 and flap 20 is the same. So it really doesn't matter.
Oh. Yeah. I was thinking back at the one of the airplanes that I flew that I just love is a 727. And that airplane, you wanted to slow down, or you get down, the old adage is that if you can see it through the windscreen, you can make it. And
nice.
That's really true. Yeah, it was a very unslick airplane. You could get it to stop and slow down and descend pretty quickly and amazingly. Okay, let's see. Touching on this, I told you we're going to finally get to this. Keep this in the back of your head, Rick. How soon do you recommend I start deploying flaps and slats to keep my speed nicely controlled from top of descent until touchdown, assuming average and normal conditions?
Okay, again, that's something that really has to do with, as Captain Jeff mentioned, the conditions in the TMA, in the traffic management area. If you're in a place like New York or Chicago or LA or even Miami, sometimes then. And they tell you, get down or fly this airspeed, and then, that's pretty much it. But, in places, and I get to do this quite a lot when we fly to some of the, basically go a little bit off the beaten path, and, I get to really enjoy flying the aircraft and configuring the aircraft as late as I can. And I kind of take a little bit of pride in that, because it's come to the point where, I feel like for you to be able to really feel like you got the aircraft down, you need, a good 2 to 3 years. And I've been flying the 777 now for about 4, and I flew the 767 for 6. And so I feel like, I know my way around the aircraft now, and I know how it responds. And so on the 777 and the 76, I don't really configure the aircraft with distance to the airport as my main factor. But I do it more in relation to my vertical displacement from the glide slope. Keeping in mind that on the 777, you don't want to intercept the glide slope with anything less than flap 15 for the very same reason, for the same thing we were talking about earlier, because the wing is very sleek. The aircraft does not want to decelerate, and you have so much inertia that flap 5 is not enough to get you down that glide slope without accelerating. The 76, it was flap 5 because it's a smaller aircraft, and all that other stuff. So what I do is I will, and this is this is something that I only do if I'm flying with the autopilot, because you have to fly it very, very accurately. I will maintain maybe a half a dot below the glide when I'm closer to the airport. And then basically use my vertical position with relationship to that glide slope and put that green altitude range arc right over the intercept altitude where basically the glide slope, where the published altitude at which you're going to intercept that glide slope, or the final approach fix for the ILS. So I'll put that altitude range arc, which you see on your navigation display, I'll put that on wherever that glide slope is going to intercept, or that final waypoint there, and basically play with the inertia of the aircraft. And keeping in mind that flap 1 speed for the 777 is 265 knots. So if I get to, once I get to about 255, 260 knots, I'll put flap 1. And you keep in mind that as you start configuring and dirtying the wing up, you are creating more lift, but also creating a lot of drag. So as you configure the aircraft automatically, just naturally starts bleeding airspeed off. And then once you get to flap 5 speed, flap 5, below flap 5 placard speed, you put the flaps to 5. And it's really nice to feel how the aircraft just naturally decelerates with the wing changing shape. And obviously practice makes perfect. And so, as I said, I don't really configure based on how far from the airport I am. I configure based on my vertical deviation from the glide slope. But a good, ballpark figure there is try to keep the aircraft clean to about, 15 miles out. If you're going to descend down to glide slope intercept altitude, manage your energy in such a way that you get to 3,000 feet or 2,000 feet or whatever your glide slope intercept altitude is early enough so that you are able to bleed that airspeed off in a level flight portion, I guess, and bleed off the airspeed that way. And because it's really, to me, there's nothing more elegant than doing a descent without speed brake and capturing that glide slope and having the engines at idle the entire time up until you get to your landing flap, and you're finally putting a little bit of power in to bring the aircraft all the way down the glide slope.
What's that story? Air traffic control tells you to descend to make a certain fix by a certain altitude, and the pilot comes back and says, I can't do that. And they come back and say, well, can't you use speed brakes to make that descent fix? And the pilot comes back and says, speed brakes are for my mistakes.
That is true.
That's a good one.
But you know what? It's interesting because a lot of ATC people, and I'm sure they know this, but I guess some of the newer types don't really understand that you can descend or you can decelerate, but you can't do both.
That's an interesting thing. In Atlanta, we years and years and years ago, but they're still doing it. They would tell you to decelerate to your best clean or your lowest clean speed. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that for many airplanes, it was around 210 knots or so. And so now, fast forward several years later, when you hear the air traffic controllers here in the Atlanta area say slow to 210 knots, you look at the other person and say, okay, they're setting us up for a short approach. And then the thing that is a disconnect for me, and maybe not all many air traffic controllers are pilots as well, or they have enough knowledge about how airplanes work that they probably know better than this. But I think that it's kind of taught to the air traffic controllers that don't have that knowledge, that for some reason this magic 210 knots is some kind of a great airspeed for airplanes to really rapidly drop out of the sky. And that is not the case. If you want me to, I'll slow down for you, but if you want me to rapidly descend to a lower altitude to make it a shorter approach, let me accelerate up to 250 knots, which is the speed restriction below 10,000 feet, and I'll come down a lot faster. But it's so funny to me that there's like a disconnect. 210 knots. Okay, that's good to start with, right? You're up at 10,000, 11,000, 12,000 feet above the ground, and you're slowing your speed, so your potential energy is being decreased. Mm-hmm. But allow me to turn that potential energy into kinetic energy, and then I can drop a lot faster. But I don't think that a lot of them understand that correlation.
That there's a trade-off there.
Yeah. So I've always been meaning to talk with some of the Atlanta, because sometimes I'll have Atlanta controllers come and talk to the pilot group at various times, and if we have questions about something or they have questions of us. And I've always wanted to attend one of those and say, hey, let's set this straight. Is this what you're thinking when you're telling us to slow to 210 knots, or what are you thinking? And do you know that we can actually go faster and descend a lot faster? Anyway. And then we've spent a lot of time on Stuart's feedback. Let's see. He says, can I also ask Rick to cover how I'd use the FMC to manage both a divert during flight and a go-around following a missed approach? Is it vectors after the missed approach procedure, or is there a neat little trick Rick could explain just to get me lined up for another shot at the runway?
So usually with the missed approach, there's going to be on the Lex page of the CDU, there's usually the missed approach procedure that you're going to fly in LNAV after you fly the actual missed approach. Remember, the way you fly a missed approach in a Boeing is go around switches, go around thrust, go around attitude, flaps 20, positive rate, gear up. And then once you get to 400 feet, you select a lateral mode, in this case LNAV, if you're going to be flying the published missed approach procedure. And then once you get to your acceleration height, usually about 1,000 feet, you'll go speed up with the speed bug or the speed knob in the remote control panel to either flap up or flap 1 or flap 5. If you're going to be loitering around the TMA, you don't want to clean the aircraft up all the way to flap up because you're going to get too fast and go too far. And so it depends, if you're going to be flying, if ATC tells you, fly the missed approach, the published missed approach procedure, then you're going to do that. And then at some point, they're going to take you off that published missed approach procedure and vector you back around. And then once you start flying vectors, then you go back to your control display unit and then reload whatever approach procedure they want you to fly. And then, they'll set you up for another intercept and then fly it that way. And then for divert, during flight, I don't know if the 737 has this, but the 777 has. I believe the 737 has it too because I think it's a Pegasus FMC system. There's a page there that says alternates, ALTN alternates, and so you'll go there and you'll have a list of 5 alternates based on distance from your current position. And you select one of those, and then once you select that with one of the soft keys along the left side of the control display unit there, you'll get a line, a segmented gray line on your navigation display telling you what direction the alternate is in, And then if you select execute and you maintain your lateral mode in LNAV, then the aircraft's going to bank towards the alternate and then fly you that way. And then in that page, you will start building your vertical descent path based on the approach procedure that you select once you select to go to that particular alternate. So that's how you fly to an alternate and how you fly a missed approach procedure.
A couple points I want to make is 99.9% of the time you are not going to fly a published missed approach procedure unless you're in the simulator or you're in an area that has terrain constraints where you basically are going to fly the missed approach procedure because that's the only thing to safely fly. But otherwise, if you're in an area where that you don't have a lot of terrain or whatever, and you're in a radar environment, air traffic control is going to tell you to fly certain altitudes and airspeeds, and they're going to give you vectors and that kind of thing. Number 2, no, I've forgotten what number 2 was. I know what number 2 is. I know I can see what you're thinking there. So let's move on. I'll have to think of it later. It's getting late. Let's see. Also, during my descents, my PFD shows the following messages: arm and retard. So I'm wondering if something is armed or I'm to arm something. So what? And he said, I've heard this on Airbus airplanes, but not Boeing.
So that retard mode of the flat mode initiators is I think it's a 737 mode because I haven't seen it on the 777 or the 76. And basically, that upper line there on the top of your primary flight display, as I said, that's called the FMA, flight mode initiator. And that's basically the active modes of the auto throttle system on the left-hand side, the active lateral mode in the center, and the active vertical mode on the right. And so I guess in that condition there, I guess the first picture, the I don't know why it would say arm there. And obviously, the when it's in active mode, it's in green. When it's in arm mode, it's in white. That's the way it's in the 777 as well. And then on the bottom part there, it says retard. But I see that you are. Well, I can see why I would say retard, because you're flying on the command bug there is on the higher yellow arc. So you should be below that yellow arc there. So I guess the auto throttle is commanding a reduction in power, but you're not letting it do that because you have your speed bug at 180 knots. So that's not letting it, I guess, slow you down. So I mean, I don't know about that mode on the 777. We don't have that.
Okay. Well, Stuart, I know you. I think we answered most of those questions, and I'm certain that if we didn't, that you can get some help from Rick offline, or some other folks in the APG community that are aces with this PMDG 737-8 program. It looks really cool. I mean, I'm amazed that the detail that these simulator products are coming out with. It's pretty amazing. All right. Well, it's getting late, and I think that Dr. Steph needs to go to bed so she can get a good night's sleep, and as well as Miami Rick, and a lot of feedback to cover, but we're just going to have to put it off until next time, and we'll try to do as best we can to get it all knocked out. And so anything you guys want to say before we
No, I just wanted to say, thanks to you guys and gals for hanging out in the chat room. Always, it's great to see the interaction of for what's going on there. I think that's a little something that we do that kind of sets us apart, and I like that. Also, I want to wish all of you, in the APG community, a happy New Year. Lots of success and happiness and love in the upcoming 2016, and really looking forward to seeing you all again next year. And stand by for APG 200. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, same thing. Happy New Year to everyone who's listening and watching and everything else, and really looking forward to seeing what the next year brings, and really looking forward to episode 200. And if you missed it, we'll be in Miami for that. Me too.
Absolutely. And yeah, we'll all three be together again, just like the good old days back in the IAD at the Udvarhazy thing. That we went to met up with the airplane geeks. It was a lot of fun. All right, that's about it. If you want to learn more about the show and ways to listen, watch, etc., show notes for this show, airlinepilotguide.com. And until next time, wishing you clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds. Take care.
We will see you next year. Love y'all. Woohoo!
Good night, y'all.
All right, and I have to quickly go to the bathroom because I can't stand it anymore.
You can see him getting a little uncomfortable.
He was shifting his chair.
Good day.